Citadel Sable Island.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful for the chance today to rise and talk about what is truly an emergency in this province. I know we've all been out and about this past few weeks. We've all got phone calls and emails, and I've been hearing from everyone concerned about the rising cost of everything, from seniors to farmers to students and to everyone in between, who are concerned about the rising cost of housing, whether that's as a renter or as a homeowner with increasing interest rates. People are concerned, everybody's noticing the rising costs of groceries, of food, of gas. Folks are concerned about the rising costs of running their businesses, the cost of planting fields, the cost of shipping goods. Everyone is feeling the squeeze and feeling quite desperate about what the future might bring. I know that the government is often fond of accusing the opposition of only having complaints, so I actually am going to take a few minutes to walk through some of the solutions that we feel would be important to addressing the current needs. And as well, I want to talk about the need for thinking about the other side of the equation. So we are optimistic about the future of this province, but we need a plan, an economic development plan to get there. But first, I'll start with the solutions. Solutions that would make this province fundamentally more equitable, pull people out of chronic poverty, and prevent exploitation. The first is to raise income assistance rates. With rising inflation and no increase to income assistance, people who depend on income assistance actually had a 5% cut in their purchasing power at the time that the budget was delivered. And this obviously continues to erode month over month. So not only did the government not raise income assistance rates, they effectively cut them, and they continue to cut them. If this government truly wanted to make good on its promise of long-term solutions, raising income assistance rates substantially would be their very first action. We also need to raise the minimum wage because the same thing is happening for folks with their wages and salaries. Don't make people wait until 2024. Raise the minimum wage to $15 per hour now, and then begin mapping out how to get that minimum wage to the level of a working wage across this province immediately. The Premier has refused to do this, partly in deference to the work of an independent committee. But of course, we're here today because the Premier is intervening to block the recommendations of an independent committee. And so his treatment of the results and recommendations from independent committees has been inconsistent to date. We've also been talking about permanent rent control. I know earlier the government folks raised the issue of rent cap, and that really is a short-term solution that doesn't offer a system for anyone to plan, whether it be people who own properties or people who rent them. We consider it a win that the rent cap is in place under the pressure from people, the public, and our party, that two governments that previously didn't believe in rent control have actually put something like it in place. But we need a longer-term solution, a form of rent control that would be in place so that landlords are not incentivized to evict people so they can raise the rent. And so that landlords can plan ahead for the maintenance and repairs necessary, their rising costs on the properties that they own. We need 10 permanent paid sick days. Thousands of people, including grocery store workers, cleaners, and some frontline healthcare workers, don't have permanent paid sick days and can't afford to take off time when they're sick. COVID infection rates are soaring once again. And with enormous cost of living pressures, no one's going to be able to stay home and follow public health advice when they're sick. We're on the cusp of a seventh wave in this province, but this government has shuttered the temporary paid 6 days program, leaving workers unsupported. Low-wage workers, about a quarter of the workforce in Nova Scotia, can seldom afford to take unpaid time off work when they are sick. People with 10 or more paid sick days per year are more likely to use preventative health services, reducing long-term public health care costs. And the evidence from jurisdictions in the U.S. that have legislative paid sick leave shows that the legislative paid sick leave has little to no effect on overall business costs and no negative impact on productivity, that workers very rarely abuse their access to paid sick days and tend to take fewer days than those to which they are entitled. And paid sick days help businesses reduce turnover and improve worker productivity. When companies respond to the needs of working families, workers are more committed and productive, and workplaces stay healthy. And we know that we are actually in a time of a labor shortage and labor transition. So if businesses really want to be able, and we want to be able to support people staying in the positions, we need to support their well-being on a long-term basis. People need permanent sick days more than ever to weather the crises of a global pandemic and inflation. Something that weighs heavily on my mind is the cost of energy in this province. Nova Scotia Power charges the highest rates of any integrated utility in Canada, and yet this government does not consider it an emergency when Nova Scotia Power proposes to raise those rates by 10% within 2 years. Nothing they tabled in the last session addressed the core issue of what Nova Scotians are paying for electricity. We have tried to amend the Public Utilities Act so that the UARB could instruct Nova Scotia Power to create a universal service program. This would ensure that no one has their power disconnected because they can't afford to pay. The government has refused to make this small amendment, which would enable a longer-term solution. We have also said that the reduction of energy poverty should be a performance target that is tied to Nova Scotia Power's ability to make profit. How does it make sense that a publicly regulated utility is allowed to rake in profits by impoverishing a large number of Nova Scotians? Another way to target energy costs is to scale up energy efficiency upgrades in this province. The Affordable Energy Coalition has called for an expansion of the housewarming program so that it reaches more modest income level people, because we know that energy poverty is not confined to low-income households. More people need the opportunity to take part in programs that don't have upfront costs. In expanding the home warming program, there's got to be increased ambition to save people more energy. Not 30%, but 50%, and there needs to be an emphasis on fuel switching. Fuel switching is so important right now because many people in Nova Scotia heat their homes with furnace oil. And the July CPI update showed that these costs have gone up a staggering 71.5% year over year. Expanding the home warming program to allow more people to switch to heat pumps should be an integral part of any cost of living plan. As well, we've talked in this House before about addressing the exploitation of payday loans. We've put forward a long-term solution multiple times. The government could provide a guarantee for small, low-interest loans through the credit union. The UARB's decision to decrease the amount of interest that payday lenders can charge is welcome, but it is not enough. Payday lenders have been allowed to take advantage of Nova Scotians in precarious financial situations for too long, and it must be curtailed immediately. As the cost of living rises in Nova Scotia and incomes continue to stagnate, payday lenders will continue to take advantage of Nova Scotians in financial precarity. The Minister of Finance remarked today several times that, inflation is a worldwide problem, and that is true. And that the forces that are leading us to see a recession in the future are a worldwide issue. And that's true as well. However, we are the government of Nova Scotia, and Nova Scotians expect us to come up with solutions to address their immediate needs as well as look to the long term. One of the issues that I really would like to hear more from the government on is also looking at the sustainability of our economy. We don't have an economic growth plan. We've been told that by the Minister of Economic Development, by the Premier, that the election platform is the plan, but obviously large components of that, such as the Better Paycheck Guarantee, no longer exist. Today we had a huge announcement sort of shifting some of the deck chairs to create Build and Invest Nova Scotia. And those changes might be important and necessary, but at the same time, that's not an economic development strategy. We need to talk about things like what sectors, what opportunities, what risks are there? Where are our advantages in terms of different sectors? We need to know what analysis is going in for us to be able to properly understand if what the government is doing makes sense. I mentioned before labor as a huge issue. We We need to know how the labor shortage is being addressed. The MOST program has been mentioned several times today, and it is an important step. But again, it's not actually tied to an economic plan that has goals and sectors targeted. So we actually don't know how investments in the MOST program will actually support our economic growth. This year, we know that farmers tilled the ground and they planted their seeds, and they face a really uncertain harvest as they look forward to what's coming in the fall and starting now in terms of labor costs, labor availability, the costs of transportation. Fishers and those in aquaculture are also facing increased costs. We've not heard anything for those sectors as well. So we need to come together and understand what is possible. We have long-term solutions that we've proposed that could help Nova Scotians now, and we also need to see an economic development plan from this government that is clear on which sectors and how and why we will support those. I'd also like to note that, of course, the other issue that has huge economic implications and opportunities is a necessary green transition. So we need to hear from the government too about how, in fact, investments in clean energy, how the MOST program, for instance, is supporting the development of that sector. We need to be focused on those issues as well. These are worldwide challenges, but we are the government of Nova Scotia, and we need to offer Nova Scotians Nova Scotia solutions. Thank you.